Good evening and welcome to our New York Giants Preservation Society meeting for today, Thursday, September 12th, 2020, with Jon Leonoudakis. Jon has been a frequent guest speaker for us. Today he's going to be talking about a great DVD he made about Arnold Hano many years back called A Century in the Bleachers. Many of you have read Arnold's book, Day in the Bleachers. And he's also going to be talking about an update on his Lefty O'Doul project that is gaining support, and he needs more support moving forward. He's going to be talking about that. Just for some news going on, next week we will have Gregory Wolf. He'll be speaking about Giant starting pitcher Jim Hearn.
I remember him.
I'm glad you do. The Zoom bill came in today. I paid the bill, so we are good to Zoom for yet another year, which I'm very happy about. I was chosen to speak at 9 Online, which is an Arizona symposium, and it will be about our group and the book I wrote. So that'll give us some publicity out in Arizona. What else could I tell you? On October 1st, I have a meeting with some of the Giant representatives from Giant Enterprises, and we are really going to try to see if we can do a New York Giants Preservation Society symposium in 2025. We're going to map out things and see if this is doable, which I believe it will be doable.
Live in San Francisco?
Live in New York. It's Saturday night. It'll be live in New York. Both of the dates would be, one would be a date versus the Mets or the Yankees. The other date, we would choose one. Giants would fly in on a Wednesday night. The symposium would be all day Thursday. And then Friday morning, be a tour of the Polo Grounds, and then attending either the Giant Yankee game or the Giant Met game. Everything is very early. Nothing is definitive, but that is something that we might look forward to if we can pull this off. So just want to let you know, hopefully to be a lot of interest. And I'd be speaking to some of the guest speakers and be asking if they're planning on being in New York to be part of the panel. I would envision anywhere from 6 to 7 speakers speaking for about an hour, a 1-hour lunch break. And when I say speaking for an hour, 35, 40 minutes, and then a Q&A. And also an area where if you didn't speak and you wanted to hawk one of your books that you have out, I'd be totally fine with that. I think it'd be a great thing. And if anybody has any questions about that, we could talk about that later. I don't want to impede on Jon too much. But with that being said, it is my pleasure to reintroduce Jon Leonoudakis, and I am so freaking happy that I said his name correctly that I am thrilled. Jon, welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you, Gary. And it's great to be with one of the great baseball groups out there, the New York Giant Preservation Society. I got a chance to meet some of you all in 2016 when we had the Arnold Hano event at the Bergino Baseball Clubhouse. So thank you for having me back, Gary. Gary, if you could share your screen.
Absolutely.
I will. Oh, let me see here. I'll wait for you. Right now, I'm not allowed.
There you go.
Here we go. Okie doke.
You good?
Yeah, it ought to work.
Yep.
You see my screen okay?
Absolutely.
All right. Let me get it full screen here. Sorry. Here we go. All right. So here's first I'll start with the O'Doul documentary update, and then I'll talk more about Arnold Hano and the 70th anniversary of Willie Mays' great catch in the 1954 World Series. But Lefty O'Doul. So we had a special film screening of the O'Doul 1949 tour film, which I shared with you folks last year, along with another recent film I made called Being Ty Cobb. That drew a good crowd at the San Francisco Public Library and Civic Center on August the 24th. Charles Fracchia, and Tom O'Doul, of course, was there. And I hope to share it with the Gotham Club at Oracle Park at some point. I've had contact with Anina from the group here, as well as Stephen. And I should hasten to add that I got to meet Kim Rupert in person. She's one of your members, and she lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. So we had a nice, a great meetup there. And so Tadeo Kanishi, you can see there in the photograph, he grew up in Tokyo and went to 2 games of the O'Doul's 1949 Goodwill Tour of Japan. So he was up there speaking with me and Tom O'Doul, and it was great. And the 1949 tour film has been selected for screening for the San Francisco Short Film Festival. It's going to be October 17th through 24, I believe, at the 4-Star Theater. I'm waiting to find out exactly which date and time. But it's done really well. It's won awards for Best Documentary Short at festivals in Austin, Texas, and Los Angeles as well. And it's just great to get Lefty O'Doul's name out in public again and creating awareness for the project. And we conducted an interview with author Robert Whiting. He wrote the great baseball book called You Gotta Have Wa, about Japanese baseball at the intersection of American baseball as well. And we did that in August 26th in Salinas, California. Bob lives in Tokyo, comes to Salinas for a summer break. And he's a very nice guy. I highly recommend his books. He's got some others about Nomo and Ichiro. His first book is called The Chrysanthemum and the Bat. Just terrific stuff. And next month, we are looking to interview photographer historian Doug McWilliams. As a teenager in the early to mid 1950s, Doug was a passionate Pacific Coast League fan of the Oakland Oaks and attended many games with his camera and his best friend, the late Dick Dobbins, a highly respected historian and memorabilia collector himself. They were both rooting for the Oakland Oaks, and they went to a lot of games, even went on the road all the way up to Seattle and I believe Vancouver. And that was from 1950 to 55. So Doug photographed Pacific Coast League players and managers during that time, including many shots of Lefty O'Doul, and had a few conversations with him as well. So we're going to get Doug's perspective. One of the challenges, as you might imagine with this project, is that Lefty died in 1969. There are not a lot of people left out there who had relationships and communication with Lefty. I think the one fellow we did who had a nice relationship with him was Mike Murphy, the Giants clubhouse manager. And of course, Murph started out as a bat boy for the Seals in 56 and 57 and got carried over to the Giants in 58. So he knew Lefty from the PCL and of course got to know Lefty when Lefty was a ceremonial spring training hitting instructor for the Giants 58, 59, and 1960. And so our big plan is for early next year, we plan to go to Japan to interview Masanori Murakami, Sadaharu Oh, former Emperor Akihito, along with some Japanese baseball historians and experts from the Japanese Baseball Hall of Fame. And so the project is currently financed via crowdfunding. And if anybody's interested in participating, you're welcome to join us here on Team Lefty. Just contact me at Jon, that's Jon, at thesweetspot.tv for more information on how you can join. But all the crowdfunding, and we have members of the NYGPS who have donated. I thank you all so very much for that. And that's crowdfunding is what sustains the project. It's what allowed us to make that teaser that's getting out there in film festivals. We're showing screenings of it in places like San Francisco. So thank you all for that. So now I'd like to transition to talk about Arnold Hano and his being at Game 1 of the 1954 World Series. And he wrote, of course, the first account of a major league game from a very learned fan's perspective. It's really important for everyone to know that Arnold Hano absolutely loved the New York Giants. Even though he had met Babe Ruth in 1933, Arnold grew up just 4 blocks from the Polo Grounds. And I believe he said he went to 70 New York Giants games in the 1928 season when he was just 4 years old. His uncle was a cop who had passes to both the Polo Grounds and Yankee Stadium. Arnold was taught how to cross the street and make his way into the park. Can you imagine a 4-year-old doing that today? I don't think so. Arnold had seats on the first base line, which gave him a good view of his favorite player in 1928, the great Bill Terry, the last hitter to hit 400 in the National League. So Hano's account of Mays's catch is deemed by some folks to be the gold standard, not just because he was there, but by the way he described it in words. So I'm going to run a clip. I'm going to run a clip from the film so you all can get the narrative straight from Hano, so to speak. All right, let me get this up here. Go full screen, and here we go.
Grounds, because what I wanted to show was the enormity of the outfield, just how huge the Polo Grounds are.
Well, the day in the bleachers, of course, is special because it covers the greatest catch probably ever made in a baseball game. And he covers it the way you think he was a constitutional lawyer.
Mays caught the ball and then whirled and threw, like some olden statue of a Greek javelin hurler, his head twisted away to the left as his right arm swept out and around. But the throw, what an astonishing throw, to make all other throws ever before it, even those 4 Mays himself had made during fielding practice, appear the flings of teenage girls. This was the throw of a giant, the throw of a howitzer-made human.
I still think of it as a nice little book. Bonnie thinks of it as a charming book, but neither one of us think of it as a great book.
I think the book fell through the cracks, when it came out, and it did nothing. But when you read it now, it's this sort of great first-person account of a fan's experience of what it was like to be in the Polo Grounds. And for me, I'm a 44-year-old New Yorker, and I have to say the 2 places that if I could go back in time that I'd most want to be at is the old Penn Station and the Polo Grounds. So to have an account like Hano's that is so descriptive and vivid and puts you right there, it's like an invaluable document.
There were a few great baseball books, not many, a few, and this is not one of them. This is a nice book, and I'm thrilled that people think so highly of it. And I wonder what the hell they have for literary taste.
Very humble Mr. Hano there. So Hano told me, one of the great pieces of business I had with Arnold was, we both loved talking baseball. And my favorite pastime with Arnold was talking about, all the great people that he saw play, Monty Irvin, the meal ticket, Carl Hubble, and Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. It was just great to hear him talk about those guys. So we were talking about the Mays catch, and he said, I saw Mays make a better catch. So there's another short film I've made there. It's called He Saw Them Play, Arnold Hano on Willie, Mickey, and the Babe. And here he is talking about Mays making an even better catch. You said that the catch that you saw Mays make was not his greatest. Where did you see him make a better catch?
I saw him make a better catch in Philadelphia, and the Philadelphia catch I was present for, Giants, Phillies, and Ruben Amaro, I guess it was, hit a ball into right center field. Ruben Amaro was a punch and Judy hitter. He seldom could hit the ball beyond second base, and he hit this ball farther than he had ever hit a ball in his life to right center field. And Mays had played him shallow, the way he played everybody shallow, and he outran the ball. And just before he was crashing into the wall, he caught the ball with his gloved hand and threw his legs against the fence to keep from smashing his face against the fence. And he corkscrewed up in the air and then landed on his back with the ball in his glove. That was the greatest Mays catch, and one of the greatest catches I ever saw. Anyway.
Mantle and Mays. So anyhow, I'm going to stop sharing my screen there. So that's just a taste of the wonderful Arnold Hano, who lived to be 99 years old, and he passed away in 2021. And you can stream the film. It's called Hano, A Century in the Bleachers. It's streaming on Amazon Prime, and it's also available on Tubi and something called Cineverse. So there you go. Gary's got a copy. If anybody would like to have an autographed copy signed by Hano and myself, let Gary know, and we will hook you up, as it were. Gary had the great idea saying, hey, it's the 70th anniversary of Willie Mays' incredible catch against the Indians in Game 1. And anybody who's not read A Day in the Bleachers, do yourself a favor. I really wish that Hano had done an audio book of it. That really would have been a thrill to hear him telling the story of that game. But if you haven't read the book, I highly recommend it.
John, would you like some questions now?
Sure.
Okay. First of all, when you were describing, I'm sorry, in the film, were you narrating that? It was great. Was that your voice?
No, I mean, are you referring to the Hano film?
Yeah, I'm returning to what somebody was reading from the book. It sounded like you.
Oh, no, that wasn't me. That was a friend of Arnold Hano's, a writer that we talked about, well, who should we get to read it? You want to do it, Arnold? And he bypassed it. But his friend Dan, who's a terrific writer and also I believe has a background as an actor, he did the reading. And Arnold, we did a little audition, and Arnold said he's perfect. And so, of course, when we went to the voiceover studio, Arnold was there. He bought off on it. He thought it was an excellent read, and I did too.
Wonderful. My other question is, I, of course, have seen this. It's fabulous. Can you tell the audience the difference between the DVD versus the book? Explain.
Sure. The book, A Day in the Bleachers, is about Arnold Hano attending Game 1 of the 1954 World Series. I hasten to add, he just woke up that day and decided he would go. He walked up and bought a general admission ticket. It's funny because his wife, another hard-bitten, cynical New Yorker, he said, I think I'll go to the game today. She goes, you're not going to get in. He said he looked at her like he was a dumb animal. But he bought a ticket. He walked up, he bought a ticket, and he went in. The film, Hano, A Century in the Bleachers, is much more biographical. It really covers Arnold's life, his career. He was one of the most published writers in the 20th century. New York Times, LA Times, and he was a freelance writer going all the way back to the 50s when that was really kind of becoming a thing. And, he wrote for Sport Magazine, he wrote for TV Guide, he wrote for Pageant Magazine. He was an incredibly versatile writer, and he was a social activist, and he loved the Polo Grounds. There's a whole chapter in the film. I asked Hano, I said, take us to the Polo Grounds and give us a visceral account of what it was like to go to a game. And of course, he delivers in spades. So we run the full gamut of Arnold in his life, and it was a real jawbreaker. He goes, this is impossible. He said, I've lived, almost 100 years. How are you going to put all that in a 45-minute film? And it was very challenging. It took 2 years to make the film, and we got to know each other quite well in the process.
Last question. How did you go about getting a hold of this prolific person? Did you come up with this idea? talk to us, and then we'll ask other questions.
I went to an event staged by the Baseball Reliquary, the Pasadena outfit that's kind of a left coast version of the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. And it was an event where it was called Love to Hate, the rivalry between the Giants and the Dodgers. And representing the Dodgers was a former radio broadcaster, Ross Porter, and representing the Giants was Arnold Hano, who immediately proclaimed, I would rather a Giant, what did he say? I'd rather a Dodger loss than a Giants victory. His passion and hatred of the Dodgers ran white hot. So, you know, and I'd heard of the book, The Day of the Bleachers. And so he was selling them that night, and I bought it, and I loved him as a speaker, and I read the book, and I said, oh, this is great. And so I found his phone number, and I called him up. And, you know, and he was, who are you? Why are you calling me? Why do you want to interview me? You know, he was reluctant and wanting to know just who this person was. So that's how it got started. And I said, well, I happen to think you're an American treasure. And I think you've got a great story, and nobody's told it before, at least not on camera. And I said, I'd like to sit you down in front of camera and talk to you about your life and your career. And he agreed. And so we did one session, which went for, I don't know, 3 hours. And by the time we were done, I was like, we hadn't even scratched the surface. So I said, I want to come back. So I went back the next time, did another 3 hours, and then it just went from there. And but that's how it got started, Gary.
That's great. Much luck to you with your O'Doul project, which we'll be getting back to. Mars, go ahead.
Well, thanks for joining us. That was pretty informative. Also brings back memories when I used to go quite often to the Polo Grounds. We lived in Inwood Hill Park, so it's more like about 40-something blocks away. I mentioned this before. I had bought the book on my pop bought it for me called Born to Play Ball, a little black book written by Arnold Hano. And after the game went where everybody was able to go out on the field, I caught up with Willie Mays, and he signed my book when I was 8 years old in 1955. I wanted to bring up the two catches besides the one in Philadelphia that you mentioned. I forget who it was on our Zoom meeting, but he talked about, I think it might have been Carl Erskine, because he was pitching in Ebbets Field when Mays ran over to pretty much left field or almost near the foul pole, and was made a horizontal catch of a ball, and the Giants won that game because of that catch. And then there was the one in the Polo Grounds where he went in right center field. He made a catch, twirled around, and threw Billy Cox out at the plate. So those catches, as well as the one in Philadelphia, were better than even the World Series catch. But of course, the World Series catch had the most importance. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Mars. You know, I should hasten to add that Billy Cox play that you're talking about. They had a Willie Mays Appreciation Day at Dodger Stadium earlier this summer, and I happened to be at the game, and they ran a piece of video about Vin Scully talking to Willie Mays about what Vin Scully thought was the greatest play he'd ever seen, and that Willie Mays had ever made. And he quoted the Billy Cox play that you just mentioned about nailing him at the plate.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Mars. Stormin' Norman Coleman. You
Hey,
are up.
John.
Hi,
How you
Norm.
doing, John?
Good. You
It's
feeling
good
better?
to see you. I just wanted to bring up your Being Ty Cobb video or documentary for a second. For anyone who's in the Los Angeles area, it's playing in Glendale on October 6th. And it's a wonderful documentary. And I was wondering, John, if there's a way people can rent it online.
You can stream it, and I'll send the information to Gary to share with you all. And it's $8 to stream it, and all the money, of course, goes to like fund my filmmaking projects, which will probably go right into the O'Doul thing. And so that's where it's available currently. There was a distributor that's licensed it, but they're not anyone I know of. So that's the easiest way to do it. So I'm going to make a note here to send that information to Gary, and we can make it available to you all. And thank you very much, Norm. I'm glad you enjoyed the film, and I'm glad you're sharing it here. It's an incredible story.
Well, thank you, John. And I do highly recommend it to anybody who wants to watch it. I highly recommend it. Thanks, John.
John, is this the real Norm Coleman or the pseudo Norm Coleman?
Well, there are two Norm Colemans. Of course, we have one of them here with us. And of course, the star of Being Ty Cobb is a gentleman by the name of Norm Coleman as well. He's a little bit older than the matinee idol that has joined us here. And not to give too much away, but Norm was a senior citizen who was a big baseball fan. And he happened to read a book about Ty Cobb, and he became fascinated with Ty Cobb. And Norm had a very limited experience in the theater world, and he decided that he would write and star in a one-man show about the life and times of Ty Cobb. A tall order, needless to say. So anyhow, it's a pretty remarkable story because the journey nearly killed him. And if it didn't happen in real life, you'd have thought it was a made-up story.
I'm sure that Norm Coleman is great, but we love ours, okay? Bill Klink, you are up.
Thank you very much, Gary. And thank you very much, John. I'm going to make a contribution to the O'Doul project because
thank you.
That man deserves in the hall. I had a conversation today with our the other co-founder at an event, and of course he's still poo-pooing the fact that O'Doul will make it, and I believe that he will. Just a minor correction to Mars. It was actually Einstein who wrote the Born to Play ball that you have and that we all have. So not Hano. So we got to give Charlie Einstein his due on that. The other thing on the catch, you see the pictures of the catch, and then there's on many of them there's an immediate picture of two guys that are I would say late teenagers, maybe early 20s, sitting in the stands, and one of them slaps his head in there, the other one, and I recently found out who the identity was, at least of one of those two, none other than Bill Cutler, who later became the Pacific Coast League president. A number of us have PCL balls that we've had autographed that, the first autograph on it was Bill Cutler. So, Bill Cutler was there, and he became the Prexy, the head of the PCL one day. To Gary and all of you, I am still diligently working with my good friend, George Tinker down in Richmond, Virginia. George is 89 years old and a bit reticent to come on Zoom, and I'm trying to get him. The reason you want to hear him is he was there that day. He can tell you everything up to the point of seeing the catch because he had a view obstructed seat, but he can give you a lot of good background about it. And he skipped college that day over in New Jersey. And again, he did the same thing. He did a walk up, just like Arnold did. He walked up and got it. He can add a lot. He's had some medical issues lately, and I am still in correspondence, and I talked to George. He's one of the great ballpark postcard men of all time. I mean, this guy's got ballpark postcards down. I'll leave you with something from the Giants and Dodgers. That's your hint. In 1954 and in 1959, those were the only 2 years between 1949 and 1964 that the Yankees were not in the World Series. Every player who played for the Yankees during that period of time, save 7 of them, there are 7 guys who played in 54 and 59 who only played in 54 and 59 and therefore did not play for those pennant winners. And one of them is our old friend, Ralph Branca, who played on the 54 team. but there are actually only 7 guys in that whole panoply of all those players that didn't actually participate in a pennant winner between 1949 and 1964. I know we as Giants fans don't want to admit to that sort of thing, but it's an interesting fact. And the only one of the 7 that's of any note is Ralph Rankin. I would have liked to have had a chance to talk to him during his lifetime about playing for the Yankees on it. But, look for Cutler. I believe he's the guy who isn't slapping his head in that post right after the catch. So a great book, and I've got it, and I'm gonna reread it. You've got the fires burning. I'm gonna go ahead and reread Day in the Bleachers. It is a classic. I've got the 2004 edition, and I look forward to making a contribution, John. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. And for those who are wondering, well, just where was Hano sitting?
Yeah.
At the ballpark. He was in the bleachers, left field. He was about 15 rows up. He was a little towards left center. And so he had a perfect view of Mays making the play. And Hano loved to brag that, somebody taught him how to call balls and strikes from 500 feet away, sitting in the bleachers, which was very amusing. But anyhow, that's where Arnold was sitting. And can you imagine walking up to the World Series, any World Series game, and just buying a ticket today? It's a different time.
John, how old was he when he was there?
He would have been 42.
Thank you.
He's born in 22. I don't know if my math is right there.
54. He would have been 30, I thought.
That would have been 32. Sorry.
Right.
The game was 54. He was born in 22.
Got it. Mr. Weinberg, you're up.
Well, I was 9 when Willie made that catch. And I saw it on TV when my father pulled a stunt and took us out of synagogue. That day was a high holy day, Rosh Hashanah. But that's another story. I wanted to make a brief point. I've made this before. There are a myriad of discussions about the catches that Willie made. This one was better than that one was better than that. But the catch off was Vic Wirtz, the play he made, the catch and the throw.
The throw.
In the first game of the 1954 World Series, which thankfully was captured on film. And it's become an iconic representative of the World Series, so much so that the MVP of the World Series a couple of years ago was named after Willie, as it should. And the last point I want to make, I've made a number of points. Gary and I have discussed this off Zoom. When you talk about Babe Ruth, what do you think of? You think of home runs. When you talk about Henry Aaron, what's the first thing you think of? Home runs. When you talk about Willie Mays, you got a choice of the first things you would think of, but most people think of the defense and that catch. So I love the debate all the time. He made a great catch off Billy Cox, and the Dodger manager said, I'd like to see him do that again, and he did. There's another game where he did it. But that play, the catch and throw in the World Series will last forever, and you don't need a debate. That is a great catch and a great play. And I don't know how many times I've watched that video. And Willie always said that when he tapped his mitt, he had the ball. He was going to catch it. And if you watch that with his back to home plate, he taps his mitt. That's all I got to say. Great play, great player, the greatest of all time. Thanks, John.
You're welcome. Willie Mays' glove is the place where triples go to die.
Yes.
Thank you, Harvey. Mr. Fracchia, nice to see you again. You're
Good
up.
to see you too. So, John, I had a question for you. Will you let Gary know when your movie is showing at the 4-Star, please?
Absolutely.
Since that is a sort of semi-local neighborhood movie theater. So definitely love to see that. Are you coming up for that, or they're just screening it?
Yeah, I'm going to try to. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. It's always good to see you.
Oh, great to see
So-
you. And thank you for coming to the screening, Charles, in San Francisco.
You're welcome. That was a lot of fun.
That was a hoot.
With you there, it's always a hoot. But you know, it would have been interesting to see a movie where they go and they interview all these old ball players who, you know, Vic Wertz and whoever else, and you know, I could just see him saying, you know, I hit the snot out of the ball and he ran it down.
Well, how far were those fences? Was it 480 to center field at Polo Grounds?
483, was it?
483, right? Supposedly there were only two guys who hit home runs in center field.
Yeah, Joe Adcock, I think, was one of them.
He's one. Who's the other? I know.
Brock.
What?
Lou Brock.
Yes. Those are the
Luke
two.
Easter. Luke Easter.
I wouldn't doubt it. That guy could
Yeah.
hit.
Probably
That's
maybe Josh Gibson,
documented.
too.
But yeah,
Anyway.
483. I mean, in any other ballpark, that's a home run.
Yeah.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
Mr. O'Doul, nice to see you again.
Oh, it's good to see you guys again, too. A quick question to John. When you were talking with Hano and doing the documentary on him, I believe you asked him if he saw O'Doul play. Could you relate that story to us, please?
Oh, sure. Always good to see you, Tom, by the way.
Likewise, John.
O'Doul said, you know, he went to the Polo Grounds all the time. And he said two things happened when O'Doul came to bat. The ball hitting the wall somewhere in the outfield and O'Doul sliding into second base. He said we could count on O'Doul for, you know, people forget he was fast. I mean, he timed home to first. He was a blur. He was an absolute bullet. So yeah, he loved putting pressure on the defense. So yeah, that was Hano's memory of O'Doul. I asked him that probably, you know, 7 or 8 months before Arnold passed, but Arnold had a great memory.
Tom, was that it? You're good? Thank you. Mr. Prince, long time no see.
Long time no see, Gary. It's been what, 3 hours? Thanks very much for bringing Arnold Hano back into our consciousness. I just want to take a moment and celebrate a day in the bleachers. I reread it after his passing and made the Astros Braves World Series of 2021 far more palatable to live for X number of pages in the Giants Indians World Series. And, you know, as much as the book is rightly revered for chronicling Willie Mays' catch, there is some film of Willie Mays' catch, whereas there is no film of the people who sat around Arnold Hano. And there is no film of waiting in line to get a bleacher ticket and to figure out the strategy for where he wanted to sit and which subway he wanted to take, and being annoyed that he couldn't get his usual scorecard, that he had to spend 50 cents on a fancy World Series program. And the idea that people, do you realize people bring radios to games now? It's not good enough just to watch. All of those things just filled me up with such joy of, so this is what it was like to go to a baseball game in 1954, if you really cared. And what Gary was alluding to there when he said, I haven't seen you in a while, we did an event together about basically about baseball writing and being fans. And it occurred to me when I reread A Day in the Bleachers, it reoccurs to me now. The first blogger baseball ever knew was Arnold Hano, and the first blog post was A Day in the Bleachers, and I'm in awe of what he wrote. Not having any video, not having to be able to go to his phone to check the details, waiting the next day for the box score for that matter. So it just gave me such pleasure to read it again when I did. It gives me such pleasure to have seen those film clips again, and thank you so much for cementing his legacy with the likes of us.
Well, thanks, Greg. You know, I asked Arnold, you know, I said, how did you remember everything from the game? He said, I took notes. He had the New York Times with him. He said, I took notes. I put my notes in the gutters of the New York Times. And, you know, I rushed home, and while it was still fresh in my mind, and you know, he banged it out. He was a very fast writer. I asked him, I said, do you like make an outline? Like we're all taught in school, right? Make an outline and figure out, what you're going to talk about. And he goes, no. He goes, I know what my themes are. I just go. Too many people sit around. They worry too much. Sit down and write. And that's the way he was. But yeah, I think that account, more than just about any other baseball game, it is such a visceral account because you can smell the peanuts and the cigar smoke when they used to allow cigar smoking at ballparks, and the beer and the hot dogs, and he was a bleacher guy. He didn't want to sit behind home plate. He wanted to sit in the bleachers where the real fans hung out. Those were his people. So you kind of get that thrown into the mix of this incredible stew that he cooks up, recounting not just any game, but of course a World Series game, and the World Series game with maybe the greatest catch ever made in a World Series, with apologies to Ron Swoboda in 1969.
Joe Rudy.
Few good ones, but yeah, I'll take Willie's too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matt. Mr. Judge, Jim Mully.
Hi, Gary. Hi, John. Good to see you again. Yeah.
I called you back.
I'm getting into the stadium now. You kind of piqued my interest in that. I hope you didn't cover it when I stepped out for a second. But what's the capacity of the Polo Grounds, and how hard was it to get a ticket that day? Did the game sell out?
No, it was he walked up and bought a ticket.
That's
so
it.
So he was able to walk. The capacity, I can't remember. Maybe someone else knows. It was a 34,000.
55.
55, I think.
The old bathtub. It had 55,000. Holy cow!
55.
And what was the attendance at that game? Did it sell out, or anybody know that?
I do not know.
Easy to check.
It'd be hard to walk up to a World Series game today and just get in. No, I'm sorry.
That's not going to happen.
Well, as we know, the Thompson game was not a sellout. And I'm looking at retro sheet right now for the attendance on that. 52,751.
There was room for more.
There was room for more. Okay. Very good. Thanks. Good seeing you again, John.
Good seeing you as well, Jim. The other thing I want to add is that Arnold Hano wrote not one, not two, but 3 books about Willie Mays. And the second baseball book I ever read, the first one was a book about Babe Ruth when I think it was 7. And the second book was one about Willie Mays, because I grew up in San Francisco, and I distinctly remembered it was written by a man named Arnold Hano. So, 50 years later, I end up meeting him, and I got a copy of the book, and I got him to sign it, which was kind of a nice thing to do. But, so he wrote 3 books about Mays, and he and Mays, Hano says, and it's in the film, he says, we were not happy warriors, because Arnold covered the Giants because he was the West Coast freelance writer for Sport Magazine. And at some point during the 60s, there was a huge offer from a major book company to Hano. They said, hey, if you can do an authorized biography with Willie Mays, they were going to give an advance of, this was in the middle 60s. The advance was $250,000. That was a lot of money back then, a lot of money today. So he's talking to Mays after the game, and he says, hey, Willie, this is what's going on. And, what do you think? And Mays says, 90-10. He goes, what do you mean 90-10? He goes, 90 for me, 10 for you. He said, Willie, that's not how these things are done. It's 50-50. And Mays said, 90-10. And Hano said, well, that's it. We're not going to do it. And he said, and after that, Mays was, well, let's just say they didn't get along as happy warriors, as Arnold put it. But it was kind of interesting. Here he was a big fan of Mays. He loved Mays as a fan. He loved him as a player. He loved him as a writer on the business end. They collided.
Anybody else with any questions who haven't asked yet? Norm, did you have another question?
I did, Gary, yes.
All right.
I'm in favor of adopting the Negro League stats into the Major League stats. But there's one problem that's not been resolved yet for me, and that is I believe there are now 5 Negro League players in the top 10 in all-time batting, and 4 of them have fewer at-bats than Lefty O'Doul. And I'm wondering if that's anything that you're addressing in your documentary.
Well, one of the short answer to that is yes, because a lot of the people that we talked to, I interview, I asked them, I said, does O'Doul belong in the Hall of Fame? And we kind of get two answers. One of them is yes, of course he should be in there. You know, two-time batting champion, fourth highest career batting average in Major League Baseball history. Then you have the other side of the fence. Well, he didn't do it long enough. Well, he was a pitcher for what, 3 or 4 years. Then he went down to the minors. He came back. You know, so he was a great hitter for 7 years. Well, Sandy Koufax was a great pitcher for 6 or 7 years. Before that, he was all over the map. He was not the dominant Koufax. So you can make the argument, look, if you're going to say, you know, guy had a short piece where he was, you know, a monster, then yeah. And then there are people who knock him down and say, oh, well, he was playing during an era when they used a jackrabbit ball. Well, so what? He was still at the top of the heap with all these other guys, Rogers, Hornsby, all these other immortals. And he was at the top of the heap in batting and hits. He had 4 times in his career, he had more home runs than strikeouts. And then the other side of the coin is he certainly deserves a seat at the table at the Hall of Fame by being named to the Buck O'Neil Award for being an ambassador and a great, you know, representative of the game who embodies all of the values exemplified by Buck O'Neil. So one way or another, he's going to get, and that's the goal of this documentary we're making. We are going to get O'Doul in the Hall of Fame. If not as a player, he's going to get in with the Buck O'Neil Award. And the next time it comes up is 2026. And the way you got to help him is you have to write, you got to do a letter. They don't do emails, but write it to the Buck O'Neil Award Committee. I believe it's 25 Main Street, Cooperstown, New York, the Hall of Fame, and write a letter to them. Tell them why you think O'Doul. I think you should specify why he should get the Buck O'Neil Award, because I think that's much more, it's closer in reach than going in as a player. And I think Lefty would like to go in either way. But that's the idea. And we need to get a letter campaign started. And this is a great group to start that with.
John,
Thank you.
John, regarding that, so the Buck O'Neil, he would not be eligible. If he got it, he would be inducted in 2026, correct?
Right. That's the next time that they're voting on it, so to speak. There's a committee that's involved.
And with all of the, you know, every other year, it seems the Hall of Fame, what used to be the Veterans Committee, is chopped into different areas now. When is the next time he could be voted on for any other thing, just as strictly as a Hall of Famer other than the Buck O'Neil?
You know, Tom, what are your thoughts on that?
2025. That would be the early baseball era.
So that would be, so you're saying that would be next summer,
right?
Which would be terrific because of you know, the Mariners.
Well,
Ichiro is going to go in. He might be like Mariano Rivera.
Right.
I don't know who's not going to vote for him. You're going to have the whole Asian contingency there. I mean, what better time for Lefty O'Doul than to go in with Ichiro?
With Ichiro.
And I have one last thing, John. So you mentioned the DVD, your signature and Arnold Hano's signature. You would send out the link. What is the cost for that? So they'll be aware.
That'll be $50, including shipping and handling. That is at a discounted price to the organization here. And you get the DVD, you get the case, and it's signed by Arnold and I. And it's priceless because he's not with us anymore. Right. And of course he was legally blind by then. So, you know, but we got him to, you know, get that Sharpie out and autograph the cover. He had a lot of fun doing that.
And of course, if anybody wants to buy that, if they want to chuck in a few extra bucks for your other project, I'm sure you would be grateful on that. And I believe you also mentioned that anybody from the group or anybody else who makes a donation, they'll get a credit on the film or something. I think you mentioned. Was that?
Well, that is TBD because I've entered into an opportunity to have the film funded by the Public Broadcasting Systems affiliated organization. And if the project gets selected, then everything will be funded up to that point. And they're very stringent about tacking people's names on as crowdfunders, as much as I would like to do that. If they don't, yes. If they do, we won't be able to.
Right.
But either way,
you're doing a good thing.
Would be a beautiful. You would be part of Team Lefty, and Lefty and I would very much appreciate it.
Terrific. Why don't we all give it up for Jon tonight? Jon, fabulous. We hope you reach your goals, and hopefully some of us will be contributing to it. And again, anybody who has any questions, feel free to email me and I will forward them to Jon. And Jon will be sending some stuff to me to forward to you as well. So we are going to call it an evening. We will reconvene next Thursday with Greg Wolf talking about Jim Hearn. So until then, good night, everybody. We'll hang around a little while to talk some Giant baseball. I'm going to shut off the recording. Jon, fabulous, really. Have a great night, everybody. Be well.
Thank you, Gary.
Gary.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Gary, for giving me the opportunity to speak before your group. And thank you, everyone here, for your kind attention.
Jon, you know you're always welcome here, whether you're speaking or not. You know that.
Thank you.
Jon, can you give us the address to make contributions to again, or the mechanism for that?
Oh, sure. With the email address?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Yeah, it's Jon, Jon, at thesweetspot.tv.
.tv. Okay. All right.
Correct.
Got it. Well,
thank you, Bill.
All right. Good night, everybody.